Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show this evening. As usual, this is going to be an exciting show tonight. It's going to be educative and informative as well. And I'm sure Prof has some greetings for you viewers joining us tonight. Prof?
Good evening, and to our viewers, both new and old. I'm glad at this opportunity to have an interaction with you. I've been looking forward to this, and I hope both of or all of us will, at the end of this show, go away not agreeing with me, but satisfied that we have all gained from the interaction.
Fantastic. Thank you, Prof. And we'll go right into the discussions this evening. We have a lot to cover from the U.S. to Barbados to Nigeria to Japan. So you want to stay tuned, and I encourage you. Please share the links. Those of you who are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, please share the links. Today is really going to be exciting. Prof, as we kick off the show tonight, we've got questions around the US that keep coming up. And right at the center of that is Donald Trump. And we've got this book yet again, another book that's been released that implicates Trump to show that he knew about the COVID-19 situation and the severity of that, and he seems to have downplayed that in his narrative to the American people and the world. What do you think about that, Prof?
Well, as you rightly said in your introduction, there are now so many books that I'm starting to wonder uh, who is going to pay me for all I'm spending buying these books to read them. Now, the core of the controversy is on the fact that he knew the severity of the virus and that he hid this from the American people. He had given an excuse that he didn't want the American people to panic. And as I do on this show, I usually will give him the benefit of the doubt when I think that as a president, uh, he must keep in mind the right balance between calming down the public emotion and say something that will spark off a crisis in terms of public reaction. Where this is different is the fact that not only did they hide this from the American people, he in fact encouraged them to expose their lives to danger. The way I would have expected him to handle this is to say, well, the government will be in control of whatever develops from this new virus that we don't know enough about. But out of extreme caution, use the face mask, use the hand sanitizer, and don't mix yourself in a crowd. Now, these three are normally what you will say about even the ordinary influencer. So it wouldn't lead the public into thinking, wait a minute, is this Armageddon coming? But he did the opposite by saying, nothing to worry about. This thing will go away by itself. No need for you to wear a mask. Get on with your normal life. See me, I'm not wearing a mask. Encouraging people to gather in crowds, even though he knew all of this will not only lead to an epidemic, but will make the pandemic worse. I think this is where he made the mistake. And having discovered that it was a mistake, he has persisted uh, in doing that even up till today. That is no longer a mistake. Frankly, in my view, it is treason.
But Prof, is it too late for him to retract his views on this, what he has held for so long? And how damaging would that be to him and the party if he were to admit that he made a mistake?
Look, he himself has said, and I think on this occasion, or on this issue, we really have to believe him. He has said there is nothing he can do that will shake the support of his base. And we must believe him. Therefore, he should be thinking about his legacy, about how when he meets his maker, and all of us are going to meet our maker one day or another, how is he going to be judged? Not by the American people, although they do say Vox Populi, Vox Dei, the voice of the people is the voice of God. How will he be judged by his maker on the thousands of, it's over 200,000 now, isn't it, of Americans who have died from this pandemic? How many will have been saved? And how many could still be saved between now and January? Because, he's due to leave office in January if he loses the election. If he just comes out and says, I got it wrong, now the scientists have proved right, please use, it takes a man, it takes a man to admit he's wrong. And it does take, well, I suppose a woman as well. So forgive me, I'm not being misogynist. I'm using, concept of a man in a pluralistic way. All right, it takes a leader, a statesman, not a politician. A politician looks after his interests. A statesman looks after the interest of his nation. It takes a statesman to come out and say, I was wrong, as Kennedy did after the Bay of Pigs fiasco. So, what would even if I was going to lose the election, he should think of his legacy.
Prof, there is a point I want to raise here. We've touched on it before on this show, but in the light of some of the issues that are coming out now, these are things that Trump has said either to a ghostwriter of some sort or something that has been said in private to people. Where do you draw the line between the party stance and his individual stance that he raises in a private conversation that then becomes public?
No, within the American system, there is no distinction between the views of the president and the views of his party. That's the peculiarity of the American system, that the president owns the party for the duration of his stay in the White House. So to that extent, if you ask now, what is the view of the Republican Party on the pandemic, people will quote Trump. What's the view of the Democrats on the pandemic? Now you will quote Biden. But before Biden, it is the Speaker of the House who was kind of like an embodiment of the Democrats. So it is the view of the president. What intrigues me is why would he go on tape? He knows he's not popular. He knows that the media doesn't like him. And he knows that Woodward is a man you couldn't hoodwink. So why will he go on tape knowing that what he was telling Woodward was at variance with what he was saying publicly, and that this was going to come out in a book? I think it is just hubris on the part of Trump. Trump is full of a lot of hubris. He goes on an ego trip. He's the president. Whatever he says goes. He can't say anything wrong. That's it. That's the only explanation that I have. I'm not a psychologist, so I can't go into that area. But I just think it is hubris. And you tend to get that with, well, you tend to get that with some kind of public figure.
While we're still on this point of Trump and books, I think he's gotten into hot water again, uh, and yet again something that's come out of a book. This time from his personal lawyer, where he's spoken quite derogatorily about Nelson Mandela. What do you say to that, Prof? Would like to know your views on that.
Um, we, oh dear. Um, in assessing Nelson Mandela, I don't think that we, public analysts, have quite gotten it right. What aspect of Mandela are we focusing on when we are commenting on him? Is it Mandela, the freedom fighter, or is it Mandela, the president of the United States? I'm sorry, president of South Africa, or Mandela, the African statesman? All of these don't necessarily give the correct posture of Mandela. Mandela is not the only one who suffers from this. Uh, Let me just give you, an example from somebody who is just as famous. Winston Churchill. The British and the world regard Winston Churchill as a hero because of the way he handled the Second World War, and how he handled the challenges that Britain faced from Hitler's Germany. Frankly, that is now what his reputation is based on. But you have Hitler's views on race, not palatable. You have you have Winston Churchill's views on race, which frankly are despicable. You have Churchill's views on even apartheid in South Africa, which will never be acceptable around a dinner table of any liberal-minded person in the world. You have Churchill's views on India, and especially the farming in India and its refusal to let relief materials be sent to India. So it depends. So when we are not talking about Churchill, it depends on which side. It's the same thing with Mandela. As a freedom fighter, Mandela will score 100% favorite rating. A man to be emulated, a man to be praised, a man worthy of the Nobel Peace Prize, which he got. But as president of South Africa, one will need to understand the kind of pressure he was under from Western economic powers to accept the kind of compromises that he made with the white elite in South Africa, and that compromise, frankly, has not done South Africa any good. It has left the white elite in control of the economy. It has not benefited the black community. It has not benefited, if you like, the freedom fighters. Only a few of them, like Cyril Ramaphosa and later on Zuma, Mbeki, who benefited. But the mass of the black South Africans who fought for freedom, it hasn't benefited them. For example, while a lot of African countries were changing their names, Southern Rhodesia becoming Zimbabwe, Southwest Africa becoming Namibia, Gold Coast becoming Ghana, people expected that South Africa would be called Azania after the victory. And if Mandela has said, this is what I want South Africa to be called, that is what it will be called today. Instead, South Africa remains South Africa. Of course, a Nigerian like me should not actually be saying this with any whatever it is you like to call it, because people have expected that Nigeria would dump the name Nigeria given by the colonialists, Lord Lugard, to Nigeria, and perhaps accepted to be called Zongai. Ghana had taken the term, Gold Coast had taken the term Ghana. Then Upper Volta had taken the term Mali. These were named after big major African empires. Zongai was left. Till today, Nigeria has resisted the temptation to adopt that name. So I'm not saying this with any glee. I'm not saying this with full-hearted condemnation. I'm just trying to explain why, the image of Mandela as president of South Africa is not as acceptable as his image as a freedom fighter. But this does not, Trump was coming from a racist background. But I'm just trying to explain to our viewers that there is more to Mandela than just a freedom fighter. I mean, this man also, Mahatma Gandhi, is suffering this. There are many sides to him, and not all the sides are positive.
Thank you for that analysis, Prof. Very, very enlightening there. Um, while we're still on Trump here, you talked about a point which I think would be good for us to look at. You talked about the Nobel Peace Prize and Mandela. Now we know that Trump has also been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize recently, and this is not the first time. In 2018, he was also nominated for this same Peace Prize. Does he deserve one, Prof?
Mm. Well, after our series on this show, maybe somebody will nominate me for the Peace Prize. Why the initial nomination of Trump was a farce, unworthy of the prize, because this was simply to balance out the Peace Prize given to Barack Obama. But this time, he's been nominated because of the peace accord that is managed to work out in the Middle East, what is now being called the Abrahamic Accord. Now, the Middle East has an emotional resonance, frankly, in the minds of Americans, Europeans, and Africans, because this is where the two major religions, the three, my apologies, the three major religions in the world, Judaism for the Jews, Christianity for the Christians, Islam for the Mohammedans. And so anything affecting the Middle East invariably triggers off emotional resonance from probably 2/3 of the world. And for Trump to have pulled off what is still an ongoing achievement, but even what is done so far in getting the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and I think there's a third country that has indicated that it was going to sign on. But there are other indications. Saudi Arabia allowing its sky for overflight permission between Israel and United Arab Emirates, something that has never happened before. It has been silent on the agreement, and I understand there are about 5 other countries that are coming on. If that is the basis of this nomination, it's going to be difficult to attack. Unfortunately, even though the nomination is coming from a very discreditable, I think it's Swedish, or is it Norwegian member of
Norwegian.
parliament? Norwegian member of parliament. It looks like it's one of those things where you hold your nose and you vote yes, very reluctantly, with a lot of repulsion, but it is a major foreign policy achievement in that part of the world that is usually where that usually wars spark off. If you look at most of the wars since the Second World War, I say most, not all, because there are others, in Afghanistan and Vietnam, that have come up. So it is a major achievement. Grant the devil is due.
Prof, there's a point that I want to raise here. I can see a comment relating to this. Now, that particular accord, we have seen uh, Trump's son-in-law being quite instrumental in achieving that outcome, at least from an optics perspective. He's been put as the central man, trying to drive through that accord. Number one, does this start to justify the fact that he put his family in such a sensitive role to try to negotiate this accord? And do you think that this could open future doors for even his children to start to take more senior roles within government if he were to win a second term? And we've seen that he started to push his daughter forward and his in-laws forward. What do you think about that, Prof?
Well, first of all, there is a congressional act, there is a law in the United States which actually prohibits members of the family of the president uh, being offered offices of state. I don't remember now how it is worded. Now, this came about after John F. Kennedy appointed his brother, Robert Kennedy, as the Attorney General, and the Americans felt this was not on, and that law was passed by Congress. So whether really Trump's son-in-law is breaching the law in playing this role is sailing quite close to the wind. However, let us look at the practical side of it. I believe that in tackling strategic and very critical foreign policy issues, actually having somebody who can walk into your bedroom with the father being in pajamas and say, Dad, I think it's got to a stage where we can say yes, could really be an advantage than having a bureaucrat, a political appointee from the outside who has to wait for his appointment to enter the Oval Office and have to persuade the president that not only are his own views right, but there's something the president should embrace. Yes, of course, it happens that outsiders, from outside the family, also pull off diplomatic triumphs. But I suspect, especially given what we know about Trump's character, his ego trip, his suspicion of outsiders. If you're having Jarrett, the son-in-law, being in charge of this mission, could have been an advantage. But it doesn't detract from the fact that the president still has to sign on to it. And so it is still a victory for Trump, irrespective of who managed the whole negotiation.
Prof, while still on that point, we know that this it is turning out in the right direction for Trump. But are there examples in Africa where people have used their family that has worked out, that one could see where this kind of model has paid dividends to the nation as a whole? Because we have some African countries where people put their family in places, and for some of these, we know it hasn't gone down quite well.
I can't think right off the bat of a successful example. I can't. Um, I can't. Uh, but even though this is not the question you asked, there are several episodes, even in my time as foreign minister, where my president sent somebody else to go on a diplomatic mission. For reasons best known to him, it happened in terms of our involvement as an honorary frontline nation in South Africa, and it's happened in the diplomatic blunder of the admission into the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Conference. So at least talking from the point of view of, I can think of uh, examples where people who are not holding the portfolio then become critical uh, in dealing with the issues. But I can't think of one where a family member, uh, I can't think of one.
From what we know on this Abraham Accord, as they call it, given the fact that right away it's been talked about as a successful thing, which it is, because people have tried to do this in the past and not achieved it. Do you foresee a situation where uh, a lot more nations in that Arab axis will then start to work more closely together with Israel?
Oh, yes, I have said so. You see, what you've got to bear in mind is that, frankly, even during Israel and the Arabs, there were a lot of Arab states who, behind the scenes, had a cooperative relationship with Israel. What is really happening now is that they are sufficiently bold enough. Circumstances have arisen, especially the fear of Iran has poured a lot of Arab states into perceiving that they now have a community of interests with Israel, and that for existentialist reasons, they should come out. That relationship should come out from under the shadow, and they now have enough to gain from an open relationship with Israel, strategically, economically, technologically, and the fact, again, let us face it, the fact that uh, for how many years? 30 years? 40 years? The empty chair diplomatic stance of the Palestinians in dealing with Israel has actually been disastrous for the Palestinians. They've lost more land, they've lost all the encounters with Israel, and um, with Netanyahu there, whatever you may think of Netanyahu, and one has to be critical of his attitude towards the Palestinians. The Palestinians were running the danger of losing more land, and being presented with a fait accompli where a two-nation state arrangement was no longer going to be visible. So, and was no longer going to be feasible. So, I think that one should not be too condemnatory of these Arab states who are coming out from the shadow and seeking an open cooperative relationship with Israel.
Thank you for that, Prof. Let's move on to the news this week that Barbados has decided to drop the Queen as head of state from next year. What is the implication of that for Barbados and for some other countries that still have the Queen as the head of state?
It's no big deal. Most of the members of the Commonwealth actually don't have the Queen as their heads of state. Separate the status of the Queen as head of the Commonwealth from the status of the Queen as head of state of individual members of the Commonwealth. Most members of the Commonwealth actually don't have the Queen um, um, as their head. Nigeria doesn't. The moment you become a republic, you don't have the Queen as your head of state. So this is long overdue. Just like in Australia, they've been arguing about this for quite a while. And I can foresee, once Barbados goes through with it and Her Majesty is not displeased, I can see more countries in the West Indies actually towing that line of Barbados and having one of their own as a non-executive president.
Well, while we're talking Commonwealth here, Prof, there's been a lot of noise coming out of Nigeria, particularly in the run up to uh, the 1st of October. Prof, what are your views on what is going on? Help us understand the situation.
Mm. Your question reminds me of Winston Churchill on one of his trips to the United States, being asked a question which was negative on the United Kingdom. And he said he had that principle of not criticizing his country whenever he was on a foreign trip, and that he usually makes up for it whenever he returned to Britain. And so you will notice that on this program, I have avoided anything that will smack of negativism towards Nigeria, because I have, by and large, other avenues to air my views within the country. However, this is a different occasion. The circumstances are quite different now. When you look at the caliber of people who have made these comments, who have drawn attention to not a coming reign, but a coming disaster, a coming hurricane, then I mean, I will be making myself look ridiculous if seeing what they are seeing, the dark clouds, the thunder, I would then pretend that it is sunshine and all is well as we are approaching the 60th anniversary of Nigerian independence. People of the caliber of General Obasanjo, a two-time former head of state, Wole Soyinka, a well-noted activist, Nobel Prize winner, General Alani Akinrinade, a former chief of staff and the first Nigerian chief of defense staff, and then a whole basket of eminent Nigerians such as Anyaoku, etc., drawing attention to impending doom. You cannot ignore the message and the gravitas of the messengers because they're all saying the same thing. They're all calling on the president's attention to the dangers Nigeria is facing if there is a continuation of the trend of public policies as it's going. And they can't all be wrong, and they cannot all be driven by ill motives, malafides. They cannot. These are people that I know. These are men of timber and caliber, to use in Nigerian phraseology. These are men of enormous gravitas who are experienced, whether in governance or as public analysts. And to that extent, I can only urge the president to please listen to them. They are not driven by a hatred for the president. They are not driven by an ill will towards the president. What they have seen, believe me, a lot of Nigerians see the same thing. It's just that these people have the platform to say it out loud. And thank God that we are blessed with people who can see things and say it the way they see it for love of country. So to me, the way forward, to cut a long story short, the way forward is for the president to go to the 2014 National Conference report. I was the deputy chairman of that conference. As a result of that, so I will not be accused of promoting myself, I haven't said a word about that conference since the president came into power in 2015. I haven't said a word about it. But I'm pleased making this my own contribution. I'm urging him to dust off that report and have his people take a good look at that report and see what recommendations he can embrace. He doesn't need to like the whole report. Nobody does. Even if he sends the entire report to to the National Assembly now, National Assembly is not going to embrace the report in toto, but let them take a look at it and see what aspects of the recommendations can address the issues raised by these eminent Nigerians. That is my prayer to the president.
Thank you for that, Prof. Uh, while we're still talking about nations, I think let's move on to Japan. We've got about 10 minutes to the end of this show. Let's move on to Japan and the news that they have just appointed a replacement for Prime Minister Abe, who unfortunately had to resign due to ill health. Do you see the appointment of Prime Minister Suga as uh, a major will that cause a major shift in the balance between Japan, China, US?
It's no. I think we are likely to see a continuity of policy, primarily because Prime Minister Suga was the cabinet secretary to the former Prime Minister Abe, was his right-hand man. And and I mean he couldn't have been uh, without sharing the views of the former Prime Minister Abe on those critical issues that Japan faces in its relationship with China, with the United States, with South Korea. Um, so to that extent, there won't be a volcanic shift. Uh, there may, and I mean, people have different ways of handling issues, even if your views are the same. So you may have modifications here and there, especially we don't know much. He hasn't been really an open book that we can start to read. It's just now that he is a man of his own, that we may start to now detect little bit pieces here and there on such an issue as the post-Second World War Pacific Constitution that the Americans enforced on Japan. Japanese troops can only use for peacekeeping operations. Um, Prime Minister Abe wanted a more activist defense posture for Japan. We have to watch what Prime Minister Suga has to say about this. So I think that one issue is probably likely to be what will determine the relationship with, especially China. The Americans may not be too upset if Prime Minister Yuga continues the drive of Prime Minister Abe to have a more activist military posture globally by Japan.
But Prof, we're seeing this change in Japan of leadership. There may be a change of leadership in the United States from January next year. Uh, who knows what will happen in some of these other major powers? Are we having too many changes at the same time? And could this cause major destabilization?
No, changes are a fact of life. There was a time in Europe when you had Boris Johnson taking over from Theresa May, Macron taking over in France, and the grand dame of European theatre, Merkel of Germany, saying she was going to step down uh, and pave way for a new chancellor. So, I mean, uh, you get changes of leadership happening, all the time. I don't think there are too many. Diplomats are used to handling this, but there's another point that I ought to make. I hope the fact that Prime Minister Abiy stepped down for health reasons and not waiting to be incapacitated will send a signal to countries where their presidents practically want to be carried out in a coffin. The moment your state of health renders you a little bit or renders you incapable of carrying out your mandate, your responsibility towards your country, step down while the applause is still at its height and let somebody else take over. But there is really a tendency, especially in Africa, for a sick head of state to hang on even long after they are no longer able to face the responsibilities of governance. I hope they will take a look at what has just happened in Japan, borrow a leaf from it.
Yeah. While we're still on Japan, Prof, I know you're a fan of tennis. Who did you root for in the just concluded U.S. Open?
Oh, I actually I was rooting for Naomi Osaka, and I have members of my family as my witnesses because I told them that I was hoping that she will win, um, because I was quite impressed for someone who, by nature, is a very quiet, withdrawn person, very young, but her posture on the Black Lives Matter movement, frankly, surprised me pleasantly. More mature, older, uh, you know, athletes whom, if they had taken some posture, one would not have been surprised. She took the posture she took of wearing, I don't know if you noticed, she was wearing a mask, a different one each day, with the name of a different black person who had been shot by the police. That's what she was wearing every day. It made such an impression on me, and I think it made an impact on the world. And that's why I was also happy that she won, because if she had lost, you have analysts and commentators who would have said, well, she should have concentrated on her tennis rather than this activism she was embracing. And here she was, she won. So they couldn't have said that. I was so pleased for her, and I welcomed her activism. I did.
Oh, fantastic! And first, I want to thank our viewers for the comments that have come in on Facebook and on YouTube. Thank you for those comments. And Prof, any last words for our viewers tonight?
Well, just to thank them for the honor of sharing this 1 hour with them, and to say that I hope they've not been disappointed. Again, I will say you don't need to share my views, but they are honestly given, and I welcome any reaction that you may have, even if the reaction is critical. Thank you for sharing this 1 hour with me.
All right. Thank you, our viewers, for joining. It's been a great time tonight, and as usual, the clips are going to be available across all our channels. The link on YouTube, for those of you that are on YouTube, is readily available there, and across all the other channels. So thank you all very much for joining us tonight. We'll be back again next week, same time, 7 p.m. Good night.